Missing children? What happened? My parents' punishment of choice was taking away my insulin. Type 1 diabetes meant nothing to them except another way to control me. That night I left home for good. I'd talked back when Mom said I was faking being sick to get out of chores. My blood sugar was already over 400, but she didn't care. You want to act sick? Dad said, locking the insulin in their bedroom safe. Let's see how sick you really are. This wasn't the first time. They'd done it before for smaller things like forgetting to take out trash or getting a B on a test. Usually just for a few hours until I was shaking and begging. This time felt different. Mom's eyes were cold when she said 3 days would teach me respect. I knew 3 days would kill me. I'd learned enough from the diabetes educator at the hospital to understand that. The same hospital where they smiled and played concerned parents during my appointments. Nobody suspected the people who drove 2 hours for the best pediatric endocrinologist were slowly killing me at home. By midnight, I was vomiting and could barely stand. The stomach pain was unbearable, and I knew I was heading into diabetic ketoacidosis. I'd been there before. This time, I wouldn't wait for them to decide I'd learned my lesson. I grabbed my glucose meter and the emergency cash I'd hidden in my dresser, $23 from returning cans and bottles without them knowing. I slipped out through my bedroom window while they watched TV. The hospital was 4 miles away, but I'd mapped the route weeks ago. I knew which streets had the most shadows and which yards had dogs. I stopped every few blocks to throw up in bushes and check my blood sugar. The meter just said high, which meant over 600. I made it to the emergency room at 2 a.m. and collapsed inside the doors. They rushed me back immediately when they saw my medical alert bracelet. The triage nurse asked where my parents were, and I lied about them being on their way. They started an IV and insulin drip while I pretended to sleep. When they moved me to a regular room 6 hours later, I waited for the nurse to leave and then disappeared. I knew this hospital like my own house from all my appointments. So for 2 weeks, I lived like this in the hospital. I slept in different waiting rooms each night using magazines as pillows. I washed up in the bathrooms and kept my clothes in a plastic bag I found. I ate crackers and juice from the family lounges where they kept snacks for visitors. Most importantly, I found where they stored insulin samples and testing supplies in an unlocked education room. I tested my blood sugar obsessively and gave myself tiny doses of insulin to stay alive. Then came the missing person report. My picture was suddenly on the news with a story that made me sick. My parents claimed I was mentally ill and had run away after stealing medication. They said I was a danger to myself and needed immediate psychiatric help. Mom cried on camera about her poor sick daughter who refused to take care of herself. They painted me as delusional and violent. They said I'd attacked them when they tried to give me my insulin. A week later, a night nurse found me checking my blood sugar in a third-floor bathroom. I'd gotten sloppy with exhaustion and didn't hear her come in. She saw the stolen supplies spread on the counter and recognized my face immediately. "Honey," she said softly, "you're the missing girl from the news." I started to run, but she held up her hand. "I'm not calling them, but I need to know why you're living in the hospital." I told her, "You don't understand. They'll kill me if I go back." She moved slowly towards me and asked who would do that. I told her everything in between sobs. Patricia sat on that bathroom floor with me for an hour. She asked careful questions about every hospital visit and every time they'd hidden my insulin. She had me write down dates and details while everything was fresh. Then she made a decision that saved my life. She called the police. She stayed with me while hospital security pulled 3 years of ER footage. Every visit showed the same pattern of me arriving in crisis with my parents acting concerned. She called child services with medical documentation of neglect. She promised I wouldn't go back to them. She called child services with documentation of medical neglect and stayed with me until they arrived. My parents were arrested 2 days later. The headlines changed from missing child to medical neglect and attempted murder. The prosecutor said withholding life-saving medication was torture. The nurse testified about finding me half dead in her hospital trying to survive on stolen insulin. The jury took less than an hour to convict. Medical neglect, they called it. Attempted murder is what it really was.